The first shot wasn't supposed to count. It was only qualification day, a controlled range, measured distances, instructors with clipboards, no chaos, no consequences, just numbers on paper, and yet when the tall SEAL candidate glanced at her rifle and smirked, the words carried further than the wind. Nice toy. A few nearby trainees chuckled, not cruelly, just enough. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you re-watching from. I love knowing who is listening. Her name was Sergeant Elena Cruz, and she had heard variations of that sentence her entire career. Too small, too quiet, too precise to be powerful. The rifle she carried wasn't flashy or oversized. It was customized to her frame, balanced, deliberate, an extension of her discipline rather than her ego. But in rooms like this, confidence was often measured in volume. The range stretched wide under a pale morning sky. Targets stood in staggered lines across dusty terrain. Instructors called out wind speeds. Flags snapped sharply, then softened. The air smelled faintly of metal and heated sand. Elena lay prone, cheek resting against the stock. Through her scope, the world narrowed to a clean circle. Breath in, breath out. She ignored the laughter. Still, doubt pressed quietly at the edges of her focus. The SEAL candidate, broad shoulders, loud voice, reputation preceding him, had already posted strong numbers. He radiated certainty. Elena did not radiate. She calculated. The first round cracked across the range. Her target dipped slightly off center. A solid hit, though not perfect. Behind her, someone murmured, "Lucky, lucky." She swallowed the irritation rising in her throat. Luck didn't measure wind drift. Luck didn't account for barrel temperature. Luck didn't wake before sunrise for years to master breath control. She adjusted. The next series tightened, near center, then center. By midday, the scores were posted. She ranked just below the top, below him. He leaned casually against the bench as she stood, sweat dampening the collar of her uniform. "Not bad," he said, almost generous. "For a toy." She met his gaze but said nothing. Silence unsettled him more than argument ever could. Then everything changed. It started with a sharp pop in the distance, not from the firing line beyond it. An instructor froze mid-sentence. Another pop closer. The valley beyond the range erupted into confusion. A training convoy scheduled to pass behind the ridge had veered into an unsecured zone. What had been considered a safe perimeter suddenly wasn't. Dust rose. Radios crackled. Voices sharpened. This wasn't qualification anymore. It was unfolding unpredictability. Elena felt the shift instantly, that invisible line between simulation and consequence. Her pulse accelerated, but her thoughts grew clearer. Chaos had a sound, and she recognized it. The convoy's lead vehicle stalled behind partial cover, exposed to unknown threats from elevated terrain. The range officers scrambled to assess. Communication lagged. The tall SEAL candidate stepped forward, scanning with intensity. He was capable, brave. But frustration flickered in his movements, too fast, too reactive. Elena repositioned instinctively, angling toward a vantage point slightly higher than the main line. She studied the ridge. Wind patterns had changed with the rising heat. Dust moved in sharp diagonal streaks, their subtle movement against stone. She steadied herself. A decision hovered heavy in the air. No one formally assigned her. No one announced her name. She simply acted. Her rifle settled against her shoulder with familiar weight. The earlier mockery evaporated from her mind. This wasn't about pride anymore. It was about clarity. Breath slowed. The world shrank again to that quiet circle of glass. The SEAL candidate glanced toward her, perhaps about to object, then stopped. Something in her stillness commanded trust. She fired. The echo rolled across the valley. A distant figure dropped behind cover, neutralized before escalation could spread. The immediate pressure on the convoy lifted. Movement shifted from panic to coordinated retreat. Silence followed, real silence. Not the awkward kind from earlier laughter, but the kind that comes when a crisis has just been narrowly contained. The convoy regained motion. Instructors regained control. Radios softened. Elena remained prone for one extra breath, ensuring no secondary threat surfaced. Only when certainty returned did she lower her rifle. Dust settled slowly around her boots. When she stood, the SEAL candidate approached. His expression had changed. The smirk was gone, replaced by something quieter. "Respect, that wasn't luck," he said, voice lower now. She shook her head gently. "It never was." There was no triumph in her tone. Only truth. Later, as reports were filed and explanations documented, the narrative would focus on response time, positioning, coordination, technical words, professional language. But those who had stood on that range knew something deeper had shifted. Skill does not announce itself loudly, it waits, and when the moment arrives, it speaks without raising its voice. Elena packed her rifle carefully, running her fingers once along its frame. Not a toy, not an accessory, a tool she had earned through patience and discipline. The tall SEAL candidate helped gather spent casings without being asked. Growth is often quiet too. In the end, qualification scores mattered less than the lesson learned under sudden pressure. Respect is not demanded, it is demonstrated. Strength does not shout, it steadies the storm, and sometimes the battlefield reveals what pride tries to hide. If this story meant something to you, tell us below. Have you ever been underestimated before proving your worth? And if you believe true confidence speaks softly but carries power, subscribe to Cinematic Whispers for more stories where silence makes the loudest impact.